Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Lore You Know. We are joined by Fran Stewart today, who's going to help us probably for this episode and the couple, maybe like the next two, as we talk about a fairly large chunk of the Ghelspad known as the Hornsaw Forest and the area around because it directly ties in with Dead Man's Rust, which is currently live on Kickstarter.
Go back.
Oh, of course, I don't have the link ready. I'm going to get the link ready, but while I do that, Fran, do you want to just tell us a little bit about what you did on Rust, and then we'll jump into the history of the
Sure.
Hornsaw?
Yeah. I was one of the writers, one of many writers on Rust. We had a huge writing team for this, a really amazing, diverse group of people who we did a lot of interoperation and interlacing of different stories together. But my specific areas of responsibility, we each got some of the Broadreach elf clans, and I got Clan Reed. They're fun, and then I also got to do a little bit of an update and tie in the Hornsaw Sentinels. And then my big contribution was that I got to go into the Golden City in the Gleaming Valley and do a bunch of work with the Hollow Knights and the Hollow Legionnaires.
Nice.
So I figured having her along while we talked about the Hornsaw and when we eventually get to the Gleaming Valley
Yeah.
would be, kind of, she might have a few things to input.
Gleaming Valley more than the
yeah.
Hornsaw. I mean, for the Hornsaw, you're just going to be getting my usual chat puns, sort of more live and direct. And then every once in a while, I may chip in and drop a half remembered thing that Sarah will have to correct me on and be like, "No, honey, that's not the Daralanot."
Probably.
Totally fair. So yeah, the Hornsaw is essentially a very large. I mean, it's if you look at the map, what is it? Oh, you know what I don't have up? I'm going to bring up
it's
the
pretty
map
vast.
of the.
Yeah.
Wouldn't believe it, Hotel. It's so good. According to my crap ass scale, it's like 400 miles.
Yeah,
Here's
that's
the.
pretty big.
I don't know if you can see the distance in miles bar, which says 400, and with my fingers just doing this, it lights up.
Yeah.
So I'd say 400 miles by 300 miles. So it's not tiny.
And at one time, it was a fairly pristine forest that things grew in and were peaceful.
The most pristine in Ghelspad, possibly the most pristine on the Skarn.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we don't know a lot about there's not really forests in Termana because it's more jungly, and there aren't any forests left in Asherak because of what happened. I mean, there's some little tiny woods, but nothing significant. And so there might be a more pristine forest in the Dragonlands, but certainly not as big. Because Dragonlands is pretty small. And
might have
might have yeah. So it could have been the it certainly was in Ghelspad, and arguably on the whole flipping planet.
Yeah.
Beautiful. It was a little bit more. So the Ganges you hear about a lot, as that's the pristine forest that's left in Ghelspad.
Right.
But it's mostly elves who live there. They differentiate them as wood elves versus quote high elves. In the Tolkienian sense, the high elves are now the Forsaken elves, and then there's the quote dark elves who are the Derdendal elves.
Right.
So these are the wood elves. This is the third. If you want to go Tolkien, I guess these are the Sindarans. Some Tolkien scholar is going to correct me on that. Feel free. Former Tolkien nerd have forgotten way more than I'd like to admit. So they're the wood elves in terms of the D&D sense. But the Ganges is mostly elf country. Like there's Veratray, and it's an elven tree city and all of that business. You don't. There's non-elves there, but not a lot of non-elves there. The Broadreach was elves and humans and dwarves, all pretty much living in harmony in this massive forest. They had their own big tree city. And they had a whole branch of wood dwarves yes, wood dwarves. It's a thing in Skarn, and humans and halflings who were all living there. The elven population was by far the largest, but the four races lived in peace and harmony, and everything was groovy. They were, like to think that was really why the hub of why they call these four races the quote divine races, because of this sort of bias that, like, no, the orcs aren't allowed their Titan spawn. So are you people. We're all Titan spawn, but no, we're the four races that are groovy. So, they kind of all lived in this pristine forest and really magically created this sort of SCP field around it, where it's like if anyone not allowed tried to go in, they just didn't. They would just be like, we're going to go to the Broadreach Forest. Oh wait, there's something over there, and they just sort of not. And that I do like to think about as like a little bit influence from Tolkien, because there's a forest from the Silmarillion that's like this, where people just, if they try to go in it, they get lost and ended up finding nowhere and just running in circles forever.
Yeah.
And I think of the Broadreach as like that, as sort of very, very protected, not by, I can't remember her name's Girdle, whatever that was, but by kind of elven magic to be like, no, it's safe. And that's the way things were for like forever.
Yeah,
nobody really went in there. Like, it was even during the giant empires of the Asathi, it was like, and we didn't go there. And we just didn't go there once the elves showed up on Ghelspad. And which may have been actually after their empire, but who knows? These books are muddy. But pre-war, gets to the Divine War, no battles in the early days of the war took place there. No battles in the early war. They were just thought about it, and it became this sort of bastion of peace in the middle of Ghelspad, of where people went when, like, they literally set up sort of a hospice there. So people gravely injured who didn't die were brought to the Broadreach to heal and recover. So you had, like, effectively these military hospitals run by these elves in the middle of the Broadreach. And the elves and dwarves and humans from the Broadreach who fought in the war would like leave the forest, go do their fights and battles and Hellbound, Madrid and Tanel and whatnot, and then come back and do their thing. And no one was really allowed in. Like, they kept the Titans out, they kept the Titan spawn out. Even the armies only came in when they were injured. They didn't do military training there. They didn't do anything like that there. Every once in a while, Madriel showed up a lot because she's the healer goddess, so she'd up and be like, I heal you all. Ah. And Tanel would show up sometimes. And Denov would show up sometimes. But for the most part, you didn't have Corian walking in going, let's build a smithy. No, these things just didn't happen.
Yeah. They were actively neutral.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
like,
I was gonna say, and it's like one of those areas of the world where the Titans weren't just like walking around, because it's not like they were battling throughout their epochs, but they would, like, Kadum goes down and just rips up some mountains because they look fun, and like throws this over there, and Mormo goes and like poison this over there, or Churn goes over and diseases this over there, and it wasn't really affected by a lot of that. So for like a long time, it was just a nice place to live.
Yeah,
but it's the Scarlands. So...
But it's the Scarlands.
Yeah, no one gets to have anything nice.
Nice, yeah. So they were well into the war. This is like, of the 80 plus years. This is like 60 years in or something like that. It's well into the war. I don't have the exact date on this. I've tried.
There aren't exact dates during the war.
There aren't exact dates.
In my opinion, at least, there are not exact dates during the war because they broke fucking time.
Yeah.
That isn't a bad concept. Yeah.
When the stars fell from the sky, it was really hard to tell what month it was. Is it snowing? Yeah, but it was 98 degrees yesterday. It's like, April on the East Coast. So we couldn't say what year specifically necessarily, unless you're a scholar or whatever. But they defeated several Titans by this point. Mormo was one of the majors left. And she was just really hard to nail down, because whenever they tried to take her out, she just snaked out and you couldn't catch her.
Right.
So she had like all the Asathi, and we talked about this when we talked about how the Asathi came to be and were defeated in the war. So Madriel was visiting the hospice there in the Broadreach, and Bellsmith gets an idea, like she does, and she's like, "We need to tempt Mormo out. We need to set up a bait that's so tempting she can't resist." And she puts a bug in somehow. I don't know if she disguises herself or just shows up and says, "Hey, hey, Mom, I know we're having issues, but she gives Mormo the idea. And Mormo at this point had been injured because she'd been in several battles, and she was trying to recover, and it was hard. And Bellsmith puts this idea in her head to say, "You could heal in the Broadreach because it's this place that's really nice and happy and all this healing magic because these elves have been doing all this healing there, and you could heal there." And somehow Mormo gets it into her head. How Bellsmith seeded that idea, I don't know. But Mormo's like, "I'm going to go to the Broadreach and feel better about myself."
And it might have even been reverse psychology. Don't go to the Broadreach.
Go to the
Whatever you
Broadreach,
do,
yeah.
because Mormo's all like, you know what? Just to spite you.
Somehow Bellsmith uses her wonderful powers.
Boss of me.
Maybe, I don't know. And Vangal and Chardoon, of course, were in on this plan because the three of them keep working together, and they basically trick Mormo to go, and they tell Deneve, "By the way, Mormo's going to be showing up in the Broadreach. Great time to fuck her up." And Deneve and Mormo's relationship is amazing because, especially when you look back at what Mormo did for the Asathi, you can't say Mormo is evil on the scale of Churn or
Right.
Garak. She's not always been this horrible monster. And in fact, she's very, very nurturing. She basically saved the world from Churn and Gorak when they made all this shit happen and were eating everything and stuff. She saved the Asathi people, took care of them, is more of a mother, is as much of a mother, I should say, as Deneve herself. So they're very kind of polar opposites in a lot of ways, even though they're very about this kind of nurturing personality. Mm-hmm. And I was actually thinking about this earlier this week because Fran and I have these weird discussions where we'll go into like Scarred Lands wackadoo lore, because that's what we do. Where I was sitting here going, 13 Titans, almost all of them have some sort of fundamental concept. Fire, greed, whatever. What's Mormo's fundamental thing? Because snakes isn't a fundamental thing, and
right.
Poison isn't a fundamental thing. What is Mormo's fundamental thing? And it was reading this that it kind of they spelled it out basically, and I was like, yeah. Deneve isn't the earth. She isn't the Titan of stone or earth. That's Katam. She's the Earth Mother. She's the Titan of creation,
right.
Not creation, the shaper, like Gormoth, who's the makey things. She's the Titan of kind of things being born and things growing. Yeah. Mormo's the Titan of things decaying and things dying. And if you look at it from that perspective, they are both creators in that way, because without birth you don't have death, and without death you can't have birth.
Yeah.
They're tied together.
They are the cycle.
Yeah,
of life.
They're no one's gonna sing the thing from the Lion King. So it is that. So
do you need me to? I mean,
no, no, we do not. So Mormo is really that opposite thing. But as a result, Mormo and Deneve hate the shit out of each other. Like there is such a just discord and anger and just vitriol between them that you get them near each other and they're just gonna try to rip each other's faces off. They really, really hate each other. I think because of this dichotomy, because of this opposite natures they have, it's like they can't help it because they're so purely part of their this concept thing that makes them up.
I always got the feeling too that maybe some of it was that they care about each other as sisters, but the things that they do hurt one another, and especially the things that Mormo did during the war really
Yeah.
really upset Denev.
Yeah. And what was interesting is, so when the gods were like, we're going to rebel against our parents, and you know, when they went to Denev and it was like, would you join us? A lot of it was that, when it come to like trying to get Titans to side with the gods, because they actually try to get the Gulthane as well, and Gulthane's like, no, I'm too scared of the other Titans, and they're like, fuck you. Fine, be whatever side you're gonna be on. And then with the dragons like, no, we're gonna go off to our own country, we're not gonna help any of you.
Yeah,
But
poor Gulthane is like, you don't understand. They've ripped away my everything.
yeah. So we've
We'll
got
give you witness for whatever.
so they went to Denev, and they're like, you could beat up Mormo, and she's like, okay. And all of a sudden, you could beat up Gorak is horrible, and you can beat up Churn is horrible, and she's like, yeah, okay. Because everyone kind of agreed that those two guys were horrible. But the thought was, if they'd gone to Mormo, she probably would have sided with him as well, except that she couldn't be on the same side that Denev was on. And also, several of the gods were like, no, we do not like Mormo. She was horrible to us when we were kids. Because, Bellsmith got her mother issues, and that wasn't going to happen either.
Yeah.
So, so that's kind of an interesting thought. Is Mormo could have easily been on the god side of the Divine War, except for Denev. Except they asked Denev first, and Mormo's like, fine, screw you, I'm going to side with the other Titans. So I think that makes it interesting. Anyway, so they trick her into coming to the Broadreach, and Madriel's often like this elf hospital doing her thing, and she sees the colossuses of 3 gods and 2 Titans starting to duke it out over there, and she's like, shit!
Nobody actually mentions this.
No, of course not. And she's like running over,
Right.
Yeah.
try to like calm things down, and the battle happens. We talked about this in another episode of the details, but the battle happens.
Yeah.
Denev.
And I'm just going to point out that the art for it, first of all, is one of the only art pieces I found, and I'm sure there are other ones, but it's one of the only art pieces I found of the war, like of these Titans fighting. And obviously they're not like really getting into it, but what's really funny is you look at it and there's no scale. So
Yeah.
except for when you realize that those are trees and not like just bushes or whatever, then you realize as they're fighting there were probably people down there.
Oh, there were
somewhere,
definitely people,
right? So keep that in mind as you look at that art.
This particular battle had more witnesses than just about any other Titan defeat. So maybe Churn.
Gotcha.
In the war, there were a lot of witnesses who saw this. Like some of them are kind of a mystery. It's like, Mesos was defeated, but nobody survived, and
Right.
we don't really know what happened.
But there was literally a horse in the hospital.
I suppose.
Sorry.
Centaur, so to speak. That was. I'm not
Very
gonna let you
dumb
find much
joke.
longer.
Wei
So
Chang,
yeah,
Wei Chang.
colossal, and it's interesting because gods on Skarn can be like any size they want when they're super powerful. So that they can be people size, they can be halfling size, they can be Titan size. Some of the Titans can be any size they want. Some of the Titans, I mean, I'm sure Mormo could be like, I'm just going to be one snake today, but that's the neat thing about Mormo is she's just basically, she's spirit, effectively, who, when she manifests physically, all these snakes show up and form her body, and she's just like the ultimate snake thing,
Right.
except she's bigger than Godzilla, and it's colossal thing. We just use the word colossal because that's what we get. So she shows up. The evil gods jump in. Denev jumps in. Eventually Denev rips her heart out, and then Vangel just takes the axes and starts chopping her up into tiny little bits and hucking them around the Hornsaw Forest, willy-nilly. But according to the Hornsaw book, before this happened, they're all like, oh, blame the gods for the poisoning of the Hornsaw, because they dropped her bits everywhere. According to this book, though, you can also blame Mormo directly, because before they attacked, she saw them coming, and she was just like, she knew she was going to go down. She knew she was screwed. Because she'd already been injured. She was going there to heal. 4 gods, Denev, she was outnumbered. You know, as much as, you know, she had all these armies of Asathi fighting the armies of the elves and who knows what down there, that was irrelevant. That wasn't going to matter. She knew she was screwed. And so and this is according to this book, she's like, I'm getting revenge before I go down, and poisoned the Hornsaw. Like, before they took her out, before they ripped out her heart, she just poisons the forest, taints it, just twists it. Like, I am leaving this legacy.
Shrink.
Yeah. Well, no, she doesn't like bleed all over it, but she just sends her power into the forest, and maybe it was to get it to fight for her. I don't know, but she taints it. She takes all those spells that the elves had made to protect it, to create that, you know, don't come in here field. And maybe that part of it was just so the Asathi army could come in and do their thing. But she taints it, and it
Although,
twists.
to be fair, she did also bleed all over it.
She did also bleed all over it, yes, because Vandal then chops her up and throws her pieces around. And, and that is the other problem. So, and most of what Madrid was doing in that fight was just going, no. Like, shit.
Don't step on that.
Really
oh my god, are you not watching?
Yeah, exactly. So she's trying to save it all, and she's this one goddess against all of this insanity.
Mayhem, yeah.
Yeah, and she couldn't really do much. So they defeat Mormo. All of her little snake bits are completely gone. Denev, I don't know. Her heart is actually just abandoned. Denev rips it out and like hucks it, and so it's like all these things are just there. And then it just sort of the Asathi kind of leave sad, and you know, but the rest of Mormo's followers stay. So the Gorgons that we talked about before, and the hags and all of those other creatures. Eventually, the Red Witch Slytherin nom on Mormo's, rats nom on Mormo's bits make them the Red Witch Slytherin, and they stay. They don't leave, and some of the Asathi stay. So you've got the Hornsaw, which was all peace and love and elves and all this stuff, is not anymore.
Peace, love, and elves.
and it twisted the elves. So the elves had this capital, this mega grandfather tree. They say every major forest in Skarn has a grandfather tree. Somebody read ElfQuest. Yet another indication that someone in this was an ElfQuest. Maybe, I don't know. Coincidence? They had this big tree, and that was one of the major things that Mormo twists is the grandfather tree. And the elves basically were in retreat, those who survived the big fight. And the elves would like send scouts to go check, what happened to grandfather tree, and they didn't even talk about it. They were so freaked out. They were like, bad.
Nope.
They didn't even record what they saw. They were just like, it's bad.
Nope.
Don't go there. And so they tried to.
I have seen shit that would turn you white.
Yeah. So they don't really say what it was. So there were 33 elven clans, and if you've been following the Dead Man's Rust Kickstarter, those clans have now been kind of released. If you're a backer, you can have access to the new 5e rules for these clans. But so the Hornsaw was completely ruled by there was elven towns and cities and whatnot. And now with so many dying in the war and this big retreat happened, a bunch of them were like, we'll go to the Ganges, they'll take us in, or whatever happened to them. But there were 33 clans still stayed or existed, were solid enough, and at the end, after the war, that they were just trying to pull their shit together. And and most of them moved to the northern part of the forest because that was about the only part that wasn't completely fucked up from everything that had happened, and not a lot of Mormo bits fell, or any Mormo bits fell there, and that she didn't taint that as much of that part of the northern forest. If you look at the map now, it's called the Broadreach Horizon, which is really the only thing left of the Hornsaw you could call the Broadreach at all.
The only part of the Hornsaw that wasn't just deluged. So
Yeah.
basically, it's the only place where like you can plant vegetables and eat them rather than them eating you.
Yes.
Which
Or,
I wasn't going to share this art until we talk about more, but since we are talking about that, where is that piece? Sorry,
I'm looking at the
keep
screen,
talking,
yeah.
but I'll bring it up here.
Yeah. So you have the surviving elves and humans and halflings and dwarves. Most of them left, who survived, but this like handful of several thousand people remain behind, including 33 elven clans. For the first 10 years or so post-war, 3 of the clans just sort of get screwed up. Clan Hummingbird. I love these clan names. They're all like, the clans are divided into 3 kind of buckets. There's the beast clans, who are all named after an animal. There's the plant clans, all named after a plant. And then there's the hunter clans, something like that. And they're all kind of named after some kind of like wolf and thing and bear. And they're like still animals, but sort of hunter animals. So the Hummingbird Clan, which is one of the cute beast clans, within a month of Mormo's defeat, they all got sick. Like the whole, several hundred of them. And beautiful quote, "The time of joyful Hummingbird Clan has passed. Perhaps when the land has healed, new hummingbirds will be born." And literally, in terms of the animal, no hummingbird has been seen in the Hornsaw Forest since. So you go to the Ganges, there's hummingbirds in places, but not in the Hornsaw. Although I imagine Hornsaw hummingbirds would be kind of terrifying.
Right. Which we'll get
so
into terrifying alterations to amazing creatures
Yes.
in the next episode.
Yeah. So there was the Hummingbird Clan fell apart. The Unicorn Clan, which is the part of why the Hornsaw is called the Hornsaw.
I'll go ahead and show that art.
Yeah. So the Unicorn Clan, the Hornsaw, why did we go from Broadreach to Hornsaw? And it's because the Broadreach was tons of unicorns and pegasi and all the mythical creatures you would think of. It was just magical forest.
Yeah.
Well,
have you seen Legend?
Creatures.
Have you seen the movie Legend with Tom Cruise back in the day? I feel like that forest really does. That is the Broadreach, and they're like the unicorns are just running around.
Pretty
There's
accurate,
glitter, just floating around everywhere. It was beautiful, and then
this happened, and the unicorn's horns changed into these jagged, sharp, nasty, basically weapons.
Yeah.
Now, and some would argue that was so that they could defend themselves against the monsters that appeared after the war, and some argue that it's just Mormo's taint has changed them from being exposed.
Could be both. But
Probably.
for those of you who have been like impaled on those, I'm pretty sure they're not thinking, "Oh well, I'm so glad that this happened."
No.
They also eat what they kill.
Yeah.
Yeah, these are not herbivores.
Yeah.
These are carnivorous horse creatures with horns. So the Unicorn Clan, as the unicorns that were their like animal that they connected with, were being transformed into these, serrated horned beasties. They attempted a healing ritual to try to like undo some of this. They basically all disappeared. They all like died as a result of this ritual. Did not go well. We give our lives now to our mother. Life no longer has values to us. We hope it will have value to her. One of the other things that happen in these elves is just massive waves of depression. Like, I'm not kidding. Like
No
thousands of
Zoloft
elves.
for them.
Yeah, whose whole livelihood and lives were like just lost as a result of all of this tragedy of their forest being destroyed. Is that they just were sad.
Yeah.
Just really sad and mourning constantly, and elves and there's some confusion as to, are elves immortal in the Tolkien elf sense on Skarn, or were they immortal or not? They're no question long lived. D&D kind of messes with that rule because they're like, no, elves aren't immortal, but they live for like 500 years or something like that, or 300. I don't know, somewhere between 300 and 1,000. I don't know. They can live a really long time, depending on stuff. So, but there's certainly that sense of, in terms of age, and like they think of humans as like, they live for like 2 years, So that tragedy really got to them because they were so ingrained in, this is what we've built for thousands of years and this is our home, and suddenly it's just ripped away overnight. So they really, really sad, depressed elves. Anyway, finally, the third clan that is no more was the Tree Snake Clan, and they kind of went insane. Again, that depression kind of went into insanity, and they just wandered off into the forest, and started going on a murderous killing spree, which would have been fine if they were only aiming it at the monsters and stuff, but they aimed it at anyone, and so whenever they aimed it at the elves or other folks, they basically fought them, and the clan became no more, or became
killing.
Yeah, or became twisted and ended up joining the Titan Spawner. Who knows what? There maybe some post Tree Snake clan members wandering around the forest. If you run into a weird elf hermit, be careful. They might be insane. But it's as far as they know, all of the Tree Snake clan died. It's possible one or two made it to the Ganges, but so kind of have that, like, I'm playing a 700-year-old elf from the Tree Snake Clan.
Yeah.
But beyond that, you're really not going to run into any of them. So 3 clans gone, 30 left. And so about.
So, quick question from the viewership.
Yeah.
And this might be a Fran question because she's worked on the clans for Dead Man's Rest. Were there any elf clans that embraced the new nature of the forest rather than fighting against it?
If I remember right, well, not so much embrace, but they're, well, we're going to get to it in a little bit. But yeah, there's definitely some of that. I know that I think Clan Lizard it is that are kind of definitely sort of leaning across heavily into the maybe this will all be okay kind of side of things. I honestly, other people had a bigger hand in the clans than I did. I really only did Clan Reed, who are the ones that the dour shut-in elves of the Hornsaw Forest consider to be the dour shut-in elves.
Gotcha.
So yeah, no, and I can say they definitely do not accept what's happened. But that does segue into the Hornsaw Sentinels.
Yeah, because the Hornsaw Sentinels are, they have sort of embraced it.
Yeah.
Because those are the people who have, saying the word tamed is strong, I would say allied themselves with the Hornsaw Unicorns, or as they call them now in 5e, the Hornsaw. I still call them the Hornsaw Unicorns because the Hornsaw is the forest, and that is confusing. So they allied themselves with the unicorns, and they kind of have embraced the wildness of the forest to say this is how we survive now in this new world.
Now, are the Sentinels are they all elves, or are they just a group of people?
Mostly elves.
They're just people. They started with elves. They're do I have the doc up? I have the wrong
Don't
doctor.
don't go into spoilers because we don't want to talk about anything.
I won't
that's
go
gonna-
into spoilers, but Elatorin, the one who basically so what essentially happens is at the end of the war, Mormo does her, big shrapnel show.
Yeah.
Elatorin is this guy who, goodbye, brothers. I go to bring tidings to the to our siblings in the north, and I will return soon with supplies and encouragement for the good fight that we're fighting. Okay, see you soon. He comes back, and he's riding through the forest, and there's blood dripping from the trees, and he's like, oh no. And he finds the what's left of the Sentinels, most of whom have either died in the fighting or died in the gusher or been eaten by things. And he's like, oh no. And he finds the unicorns, and all but 2 or 3 of them have been, I don't remember exactly how many, but almost all of them have been killed. And he's like, oh no. But one unicorn mare is there, and she's pregnant. And the creature inside of her tears open her belly, rips its way out, and goes, and he's just like, toing.
Right.
He's like, this is all for the best. This is how it's supposed to be. I'll continue to protect the forest because that's clearly the right thing to do. He breaks
Yeah.
completely, but the Hornsaws don't hurt him. The Hornsaws are just like,
Unicorns.
yeah, you're our bud, and he comes to protect them.
Yeah.
And so he truly does embrace it. And the Sentinels' attitude is, this is how it's supposed to be. And I can go into a little bit of how they think about that, which is that Mormo gave the forest a gift.
How they think about it.
Yeah, their view is
Yeah.
that Mormo was fighting on behalf of nature. That Denev has betrayed nature by trying to make it all meek and soft and cuddly and friendly. And Mormo, like she did back in the days of Gorak, is the only one who says nature, in order to exist, must defend itself. And so their whole view is, the Hornsaw Forest is how nature has to be if there's gonna be any nature on Skarn.
That was.
So, but yeah,
That is like 100+ years later than the part
Yeah.
I was still on, but that's fine.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
No, it was good stuff. It's really good
Mhm.
stuff.
Yeah.
But that's all happening today,
mhm. Yep.
well, so to speak.
Well, it takes him a while to sort of
Well, yeah.
pull together the scraps of his brain again, and he basically starts hunting anyone who comes in and tries to harm any of the forest creatures.
Yeah.
Gradually over time, there are some people who come in who try to get him, and he gets them and basically sits them down and explains himself to them, and they're like, yeah, that makes
Okay.
sense.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are kind of interesting individuals, but over time they form this kind of weird network. And yeah, there are a lot of elves, but there are a lot of other people too. And in fact, if you have the latest Kickstarter, you'll know the latest Kickstarter batch. Actually, were they in the latest Kickstarter batch?
Is that the one that comes out on
I
Monday?
think they're in the appendix.
They're in the the current field leader of the Sentinels, Ordina, is actually a Manticora.
Nice.
So yeah, they have a mission, and if you're not against them, you might actually be able to work with them.
Yeah.
But it's
I do get the
they're-
feeling that they're the kind of people that if you're in the forest, and I'm going to bring up the art again, and this plant comes to life and starts trying to eat you, and you're defending yourself, and they show up, they're going to help that plant kill you, because it's not the plant's fault that you were there. trying
Yeah.
to put yourself in its mouth.
Yeah, what they'd probably do actually is watch, and if you're strong enough to overcome the plant,
Yeah.
they'll be like, okay, yeah, good job.
That's
They're not gonna
also
help you.
fair.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good
They're
job.
not
You
gonna
want to
do
have
it.
dinner? Could you heal me? No, but if you want to come have dinner, we can talk about why that plant's there.
Yeah.
You
That is
seem strong
also
enough.
completely
So-
fair. Totally.
Mhm.
All
Yeah.
right, so we'll jump back into
Because I have to explain what happened to the elves to explain how they got this way.
yeah,
Because
going back to the
Because they took their own screwed up path.
yeah, they took their own script. So like those first 3 clans that I talked about
Mhm.
a little bit ago, that was all within the first couple years after the war.
Okay.
Meanwhile, the elves, various clans sent representatives to go do this like gathering to be like, what do we do? What can we do? How do we survive? How do we deal with this giant thing? And meanwhile, Titans are like moving in, or Titan spawn are moving in, and so the Ganges elves are like, we'll give you a place you can meet and chat. So they set aside this little valley, be like, here, you can chat here. And representatives of all of the 30 elders, basically, of all the 30 clans go, and they talk about it. Like, what do we do? And they talk about it for like literally a couple of years. They debate this, and their allies, the humans and the dwarves and the halflings, all are there. And really early on, they piss off the humans. I'm guessing because they're just taking too long debating. And the humans are like, "We're out."
It just
and
reminds me of the Ent mood
like,
in Tolkien,
Yeah,
where they're just like taking way too long to make. Wait, are you really a human? Let's
Yeah,
discuss.
I got the impression it was some of that, and some of also that they
they
really pushed wrong, and
yeah,
like they
they were
talked.
offended.
Yeah, the people from the records talk about the fact that we screwed up and it feels terrible, and we, they do eventually come around to, at least some of them, owning the fact that we screwed it up.
We screwed it up. Yeah. So the humans get offended. Not all of them left, but like the majority of them left. Then the dwarves were just depressed, and they get this like message from Burok Torrent saying, "You could come here,"
Yeah.
and they're like, "Sounds like a plan." And like, not all the dwarves, but a vast chunk of the dwarves went there. There weren't a lot of halflings to begin with, but again, I think a lot of the halflings are like, we're gonna go check out what's happening in that hegemony. Or I don't know where the halflings went, but a bunch of the halflings left too. And so the population of remaining humans and dwarves and halflings were just shrunk down to hundreds. And then, like, they just really could decide nothing. This whole big council, all it did was basically ostracize a bunch of people and no ideas. So finally, they were like, okay, we need to really focus on this. So one elder of each clan was given the task to spend the next year meditating on it. So 30 old elves
Right.
spent a year just in silent meditation. Like, here's your girl, we'll see you tomorrow, kind of thing. Just went off in a top of a tree or in a cave or whatever the heck elves meditate, and just did this for a year. No ideas, nothing, for 399 days.
Right.
Day 400, because years in Skarn are 400 days long. Day 400, that night, as they're doing their little meditative thing, all 30 of them have the same dream vision. I'm like, that's totes Arios. Arios sent them a vision. I don't know, some otherworldly, whether it was Denev or Madrid, or somebody,
Right.
anyway, somebody somehow, or their own collective consciousness came up with this idea. And they all have this dream vision, and they all go meet because it's day 400 and they're supposed to. And they all go meet, and like they're all like, talk. And then suddenly it's like, I had this dream vision last night, and somebody's like, I did too. And then suddenly realize they all had the same vision. And they're like, we need to do it. We all had this vision, we need to do it. And they had this vision, this crazy ritual, and they bring it to everybody. We have this crazy ritual. And a lot of people are like, this sounds like a bad idea. And the idea is that that they would become one with the forest for 100 years to heal it. And most people were like, at first were like, that's a long time.
Right.
but it kind of convinced everybody, and even the humans were like, yes, we'll help. And they were like, no, you won't. You'll be dead. Because we've seen, and part of the vision is we age during this. We don't like go into stasis. If you join us, you don't get to live your lives. We're not letting any humans participate in this. I'm sorry. No. And the humans are like, and the humans and halflings are like, oh, I think the halflings were just like, good, okay. The humans were like, oh, they're like, no. And then the dwarves, of which there's like a few hundred, are like, we're gonna stay with the humans because they need help and they're kind of lost without somebody to take care of them. And the elves are like, yeah, that's probably a good idea. Okay, honestly, if it was just elves and dwarves anyway. So the dwarves do. And these thousands of elves who remain all go into this dormancy. They do this ritual. First, they do this massive ritual, and then they just disappear, just vanish. They do the what you call it, I snap my fingers. They do the snap.
Transfiguration.
Yeah. Become one with the forest, and they're just gone. And the dwarves and the humans are just, and the halflings are just standing there like, what just happened? They're gone. So they're like, I guess we move on. And they build a village, because there's only a few hundred of them left, because like I said, most of them barred off to other places. And they build a little village on the Broadreach horizon, and it's just this like one town left of what was thousands of people. It's one little town, and a couple of like small, pockets of people here and there, like those two guys have a hunting shack, but the vast majority of people live in this one town. And this happened on Grim Day AV 15, so roughly January-ish.
Yeah.
Toward the end of AV 15. First day of the year is actually the first day of spring. So, and I love this description of one of the elves who experienced this said, those who remember little of the 100 years, a sense of being part of a collective, but so vast, like drops of water in a lake of blood, or candles in a live volcano. I thought that was kind of another awesome little snippet from the book. But they do have like little bits of memories of what happened. And there's these wonderful little tales. There's little stories throughout the rest of the Hornsaw book of what the elves did during that intervening time, and how they still impacted things, but in kind of a weird way. Would it have been better if they hadn't have done this?
Yeah, nobody knows.
Nobody knows.
They just sort of have faith that they were able to bend faith.
Yeah.
And kind of swirl events a little bit in a better direction than they would otherwise.
But the tale. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I guess you could, unless I'm misremembering this, I feel like the dwarves would think it would be better if they hadn't done this.
That was about to get to that.
Yeah,
the dwarves
perfect.
think it would be better if they hadn't done this.
Because, right.
Because of what happens next. So the tale kind of continues with those who stayed. And so there was this little town where mostly dwarves and humans lived in this little village, little walled town that was pretty well defended. They weren't, Titan spawn really pretty much leaving them alone, but they were pretty much isolated behind their town walls. And until in AV 35 AV, oh no, wrong year. The Wood Dwarves, 31 AV. The Necromancers of Hochhalter, who, when we talked about those guys last time, those necromancers who had left the Holofaust and stomp. This was right after too, like the dates. Assuming I don't even have them wrong, because I didn't do a check on those dates.
They show up in the Hornsaw and they're like,
yeah,
so we're gonna need labor.
Dates sound off to me. I don't think the Necromancers were around in AV31 yet in the Hornsaw from Ghelspad. I'm gonna look that up. But anyway, so Necromancers from Ghelspad. Are we hung? No, okay. Show up. My Hornsaw or my Holocaust. But Necromancers show up. They besiege the village. And prior to this, the village had been able to protect itself. They couldn't from this siege of Necromancers, and they poisoned their food and water. And eventually broke the walls down as everybody's getting sick and starving, and took and just slaughtered a bunch of people and took the rest prisoner. And they basically killed the old and sick and the young, and just kept kind of the people who could walk.
I would say they probably kept the others as well, just not in the same way.
Well, yeah, I was about to get to that. So they had about 150 humans and 100 dwarves left, and the rest were basically the things that were leading them back as they raised everybody who could walk as zombies. And it was this, like, think about like the most horrifying situation. So you're a bunch of humans and dwarves surrounded by your grandparents as zombies and your kids as zombies, and they're leading you on this forced march through the dread forest.
Yeah.
As they led them to Ghelspad.
I will point out that Ghelspad are the main villains. Would that be a good way to say it?
One of the main villains.
No, not even one of. They are the big wax mustache twitching, moo-hoo-hawing, dripping evil. Would you like an apple deer? Right. Villains in the story.
Yeah.
Deer. But there are my point. Yes, they're the main villain in Rust, but there are plenty of other villains in the Hornsaw Forest.
Absolutely.
Was the point that I was trying to make. I do feel the need to match these dates because my brain is just like, they really get kicked out of Ghelspad until that young. That really Holocaust that early. Anyway, I'll look that up later. So
I'm looking it up. I'll figure it
out. So Necromancers brought them back to Ghelspad.
Yep.
And it was really sad. And basically stuck them in a prison for like 2 months underground, where they had just and it was, I'm pretty sure, like a deeper darkness spell was cast on it, no less, because they describe it how even the dwarves couldn't see more than a few inches in front of their faces, which I'm just like, that's not even, dwarves can normally see in the dark.
Yeah.
This is just really bad. And the humans were just like completely blind. And they were like, twice a day, these zombies would show up and give them gruel, and they'd have to chase the rats away before the rats ate the gruel so that they could, and it was just horrible. And they're down there, and and somebody died of like sickness or whatever, the zombies would show up to drag the body away to turn it into another zombie, and they'd be like, no, you can't do that. Right. And then the necromancers would come and punish them, and they like I guess taking the body away. It was sad and horrifying. And then after about 2 months down in this hole, this kind of servant of the necromancers, this like what they call the Pale Man, shows up, and he says, "We're so sorry. We made a mistake. We didn't mean to attack your town. We didn't mean to throw you in prison. It was a mistake of paperwork." Like, seriously, he says this, and they're like, "Sure, I don't think so." And he's like,
"We fired that record keeper."
Exactly. It's pretty much what he says. He's like, "They're in trouble now. We'll take you. We'll feed you. We'll give you a home. We'll give you jobs, and you can be okay." But by this point, another huge chunk of them have died of various things in this pit for 2 months. And they're miserable, and they're just like, "Sure, just get us out of the pit. Yeah. Anything you say, buddy." Because they got nothing to fight with. They got nothing left. So he brings them up, and at this point, there's what the number is down to 100 humans and 80 dwarves. So think about what the numbers were like, and they're just shrinking numbers. And the humans range from the age 16 to 51, and the dwarves are equivalent in dwarven years. So no really old, no kids. And this pale man brings them to this smithy, basically, that they've built. And it's this pretty small area. It's got like half a dozen rooms, and it's like there's a bathroom and a bedroom and whatever, and shoves all 180 of them, and they're like, you live here now. And they're like, here's some food and water and baths. And they're like, yes. They're like, oh, food and water and baths, and we have a bed to sleep in, and all this stuff, and we're like sleeping on the dirty ground and chasing off the rats. It's really nice. But they're all super suspicious because, come on. And they realize they can't leave these 6 little rooms. And it's pretty crowded, and there's this, in the middle of them all is this forge. And the dwarves are like,
I get it. Yeah.
they want us to build weapons for their armies of zombies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That
Yep.
sucks. And was that, and the point of view character actually philosophizes, thinks about it, it's like, did they really spend all of those resources against the siege just to capture 100 dwarves to work in their smithy? That was a lot of work for just us.
Yeah.
But she doesn't know. She's a great character, by the way. The story, I'm glossing over the details, but the story she tells is just, it's heart-wrenching.
Yeah.
She's this young dwarven bard, and it's like it's really heart-wrenching because she talks about this. I skipped a couple parts. She has this flute that she plays to bring up everybody's spirits because she's a bard, and when in the Long March, they would, like, the necromancers would beat them up and be like, no, you must march, and they were all freaked out. And at one point, to kind of raise spirits, some of the dwarves started singing, and the necromancers were like, oh, yeah, whatever, just let them sing. They're walking, we don't care. And all the dwarves start picking up this song, and then the dwarven bard she's realized she still has her flute, and so she pulls out her flute. She starts playing the flute, and the necromancers realize, or the guards, not the necromancers, but the guards working for the necromancers realize, like, wait a minute, this is getting too out of hand. No, stop singing. And this spirit, this like ghostly elf, appears and touches the shoulder of the guard, who's about to rip her flute away and break it. And he stops. And she realizes this is going on. She's looking around and she sees these ghostly elven spirits all over the place, just sort of touching the shoulders of the guards who are about to beat the shit out of the dwarves. And they stop. And they're like, okay, whatever. And they don't beat them up, and they just let them go back to what they were doing.
That's not
And
the
they don't
flute
take
I'm
the
looking
flute.
for.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly. So they don't help, they don't free them, they don't rescue them, they don't save them, but they stop them from going through yet another slaughter.
Yeah.
They lean events rather than
Yeah. So they don't. It's like a slight influence. And then so that happens.
I did confirm, looking at our reference timeline, that Ghelspad was established, and in fact they were already a year before the siege on the Broadreach dwarves. They were working with the Torn Womb to set up a siege on Hochhalter.
Gotcha.
So when did they kick? What year did they get kicked out of Hochhalter?
I don't actually have a note on a
It was
specific.
before AB 131. Okay.
Yeah, it was before
AB
AB 31. Yeah.
Okay, good. Because I was like,
Yep.
that seems early, but glad to know that the dates lined up. I'm happy. 'Cause sometimes they don't, so I like to double check that. So yay on that. So anyway, that happens, and the dwarves are living in this like forge in the middle of Ghelspad, working for the necromancers, building weapons, and really they try many times to escape. Nothing ever works because magic and misery and zombies. Although at this point they're not dealing with zombies, they're dealing with skeletons, so it's a little less quickie. The necromancers realize, let's not make it recognizable, like they figure it out in Hochhalter. Stop exposing people to recognizable members of their family. Can't tell who the skeleton was beyond it's short. Maybe it was a dwarf. So, and they lived there for like decades. And eventually and not all of them are smiths. Like not even the Spark. She's a Bard. She's not a smith. And so a bunch of them aren't smiths. And the humans really aren't smiths. So one by one, the Pale Man and the Necromancers showed up, and for the people who behaved, they were like, "We'll give you another job. You don't seem like a smith. You seem more like a carpenter. We'll find you a job in the city where you can build chairs." And they would like one by one offer the humans other roles, and the humans would leave, and the dwarves would never see them again. Until finally all of the humans left, and it was just dwarves living in this forge. None of the dwarves were offered an alternative. They were all, whether they were a smith or not, they were all stayed. And eventually, like the point of view character Gimath, she got married. She had a kid. Her kid grew up. Her kid got married. Her kid had a kid, and she actually had several kids. And those kids, so by AV-112, nearly 100 years, she's now a grandmother with little baby dwarves. Like her grandkids are still infants, living in this little tiny thing of 6 rooms, or however many rooms it was, this little tiny area. 3 generations of dwarves now who've been smithing for these necromancers. AV-112, the Blood Crone, who we will talk about later, mega powerful hag Mormo worshipper. And note that the Necromancers of Glividotel, not Mormo worshippers, allied kind of, but not really. And by this point, clearly the alliance has fallen apart because the Blood Crone decides to attack Glividotel for reasons.
Yoink!
And this is actually kind of the rise of Lucian Dane, who's a major character in Rust. Lucian Dane, the Black Messiah, was instrumental in fighting off this siege in Glividotel. And the dwarves describe it as him just appearing everywhere, like all over the place, battling the Blood Crone armies as they're besieging the city. Meanwhile, the dwarves are like making weapons as fast as possible and working, 20-hour days, building swords and not allowed to sleep and barely time to eat, and working literally in some cases working their fingers to the bone, and many of which fall over exhausted and they're dragged off to become members of the military. It's not clear if they're going to win or lose. They're like, and they're like, do we want the Blood Crone to take over Glividotel? It could be worse. At least we have food now. So gets down to it, and it's like the siege has been going on for ages at this point, and a handful of necromancers come in, and she listens to them talking, and they're like, well, we don't need any more weapons. No, we don't. But we need about 100 more men at the south wall. And she's like, she looks at them, she looks at the people, she's like, there's 100 dwarves here. How fucked are we? And then she hears a voice in her mind. Play your flute. She's like, and by the way, at this point, she's gone through this mega depression. She's played the flute in years because one of her best friends, her mentor, had died and had been dragged off to become a zombie, and she'd seen him like as a zombie and just super depressed. Hadn't played the flute in years, and this voice in her head, play the flute. She's like, okay, so she pulls out the flute and she goes to play, and she plays that same song that she played on the march. And the necromancers are like, we're gonna turn them into zombies. Guess not. Never mind. You're done making the weapons. You can go to sleep now. Goodbye. Blah. And they fuck off.
We don't need to see their identification.
Right?
Yeah, second time, Jedi mind trick. Like, cool. Flute makes Jedi mind trick. And, yeah. And then, just a couple years later, a bunch of elves show up. Real elves this time, not ghost elves. Sneak in, free the dwarves.
Yeah.
And these elves are elves who remembered doing it, who remembered being a ghost and trying to do what little they could to help them. And they're like, we know there's this group of dwarves enslaved by the necromancers. We have to do something. So they sneak in and do their elf druid magic and get them out. And that was about AV 116. So they've been pretty much free since then. And they've now joined the elven community, and there's like a village of these dwarves, of the descendants of these dwarves out there. And presumably the bard is still alive, and her grandkids have now grown up a bit, and it's kind of cool. So that's neat. That's what happened to dwarves. The humans, as I said, most of them, who knows, they might have joined the necromancers. They may have been captured by the blood crone. There is another little story about some of the. Remember, I mentioned that most of them lived in this town, but there was a few pockets of people here and there. There's another story about these humans who, like, a human couple who lived in like a little house, and they were just kind of nuts and trying to survive on their own. And there's a tale about this guy who was starving to death, and went out hunting to try to find food for his wife. And his experience also seeing the ghost elves and them helping him. And so there's these little incidences. And another one of no, the other one actually is post-war, so never mind. So anyway, there's the two examples of like where ghost elves help people. Want to read that story in more detail? Go pick up the book Hornsaw Forest of Blood.
Yeah, it's really interesting because that, like, pretty much the entire history chapter is written in first person. It's all tales of first-hand accounts of it, rather than, that kind of. I don't want to say that non-story style is dry, but it can be. It can be very textbook, trying to get through. And this whole thing is just like story after story.
And I love
it.
It's
really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of why I wrote the Fenrilic lore. I started to write the Fenrilic lore that way because I liked it. I liked the way this was presented so much. So the elves come back 100 years, maybe 115, and they're messed up. They're really because they're like 100 years went by, and they've aged in that time. So middle-aged elves still look like middle-aged elves, but the young kid elves are now, because this was every elf, like infant elves were involved in this ritual. Nobody was exempt. So little kid elves are now adults. Older adults are now old, and it's just weird. And they're trying to process that this happened, and just trying to recover from it. And they're still those clans, and they try to rebuild that. They've established their little clan settlements. Those who kind of survived that, and that back into making the 30 clans. Some of those halflings and humans and dwarves that somehow survived all of this ended up, kind of joining some of those clans. Don't ask what happened to the halflings. I didn't find any anecdotes about the halflings. Maybe it's later in the book. There weren't many. I just know they were part of Porcupine Clan. And there's one other kind of story that happens pre-AV-150 it's interesting, which is the idea of lycanthropy, and this group called the Accursed. Happened in AV-120, so 5 years after the elves' return. It's a really cool story, which does have to do a little bit with what Fran wrote for Rust.
Mm-hmm.
Which I was like, you actually got the clan that had this story, like the only clan mentioned explicitly in the history chapter. Good on you. Mm-hmm. Should I tell this or?
You have it more recently than I do, so yeah, okay. Probably.
So the Clan Reed, which was just one of the plant clans who were really one of the sadder clans because their land was just completely trashed because.
Yeah, basically they lived in the marshlands along the sides of the Broadreach River, So there was a literal tsunami of blood that came down and washed away most of the habitat that they lived on, and a lot of the people and villages and so forth. So they scooped up what little bits of the ecosystem they could find, and they brought it with them to the Broadreach Horizon, to an area where there was marshland and fed by a lake and everything, sort of facing onto the Haggard Hills. And then they went through the ritual, sort of going, hopefully by the time we get back, stuff will have grown up a little bit, we'll come back and our ecosystem will be there. They came back to discover that in the intervening time, the dust from the Haggard Hills had filled in most of the marsh. So what's left of this marsh ecosystem is this tiny, frail sliver. And so they really kind of don't trust anybody who's not a member of the clan already at the point that this story takes place.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're one of the more dour of the dour clans, as Fran said earlier. So a group of them were out hunting, like you do, and they got ambushed by these were-rats. These and what's interesting is lycanthropes, as a rule, aren't necessarily Titan spawn in the sense of following the Titans.
Right.
Most were creatures are actually associated with Mormo. So these were-rats, were they Titan spawn or were they associated with Mormo? It's not clear. Or not Mormo. How was I say Mormo? Bellsmith. Bellsmith. Hi. Caffeine hasn't kicked in yet. Forgive me. So were these rare rats associated with Bellsmith or with Mormo or with one of the Titans? We don't know. So,
but they were jerks.
They were jerks. Anyway, so they attacked the elves, and the elves are freaking out and they're fighting these. And they're just getting their asses kicked. And one of the leader of this hunting group, Piantos, her daughter is with the group, and her daughter gets just taken out by these were creatures, and a bunch of people get bit and scraped. They're in the middle of the fight. They're just screwed. They know they've lost. And suddenly, a wolf and a bear and some other rats show up, and they start fighting the were-rats that ambushed them. And they're like, the hell? And so it turns out there are other lycanthropes who are not on the same side as the were-rats, although some of them are also were-rats, and they fight them off. And in fact, at one point, they're handed silvered weapons. Be like, here, use this. Have a short sword that's made of silver, so you can fight. And because that was one of the reasons they were so screwed in the battle, because Piantos was literally the only one who had a magic weapon, and their just weapons weren't effective against these were creatures, because D&D lore, you need a silver and/or magic weapon. So the tides turned, and then Piantos calls for retreat, and the survivors run off. And meanwhile, these were creatures on their side are like, "Wait, come back, we can help you." And they're like, "No, you're scary," and they retreat. And these were creatures, they defeat the were rats, and then they're like, "We should go warn them because several of them were bit, and they're going to turn into were rats if they don't know the way to undo that, and we should help." So they try to go find them to warn them, and they don't, but they do run into another elf clan, Clan Wolf. Clan Wolf is like, "Hey, you guys are pretty cool. Some of you are wolves, sort of. That's neat." And they're like, "Yeah, cool." And they plan to become friends. And it's basically the accursed are this group of were creatures of all different kinds who are basically dealing with their lycanthropic sides together. And they've created this little fort in the middle of the Hornsaw where they're this little community. And eventually Clan Wolf comes to Clan Reed going, "By the way, some of your folks got bitten by were-rats and we want to help you, and we know these other lycanthropes who know how to undo the curse, and we could go talk to them." And so the Clan Reed is like, "We don't want to do that," but they get talked into it. Fran, correct me if I'm getting this wrong, but
no, that's about right. They're really suspicious, but they're like, "What else can we do?"
So they send everybody who was in the fight And Piantos was like the only. It's just like, I'm not going. Screw it. No, she doesn't go, but everyone else who was in the fight goes, and they go hang out with these lycanthropes for like a month until the moon comes, and they're like, they do the thing, and they do the ritual and undo the lycanthropy, and send them back home. And Piantos is pissed. She doesn't get it though. She somehow, I guess, made her fortitude save, constitution save, and doesn't become a were creature, unlike most of the folks who were in the fight. Most of them get cured. 2 of them deliberately stay were-rats, which I thought was interesting, and leave Clan Reed and join the Accursed. And they're like, we're kind of okay with this. This is something that happened to us, and we want to deal with this. So they decide not to go through the cure. So there's this interesting connection between Clan Reed and the Accursed, where 2 members of Clan Reed are now part of them, but they're still isolatory. And Piantos has a lot. She doesn't lead Clan Reed, but she has a lot of say in what happens with them. So a lot of political influence. So it's kind of interesting dynamic there, where they've got this weird alliance, and yet they still are isolationists. Meanwhile, Clan Wolf is like, this is kind of neat. And one of the Accursed spends a lot of their time during the rest of the month with Clan Wolf, and then just goes back to the living in the Accursed fort during the moon cycle. So, and I think that's kind of neat. And I think she's actually a Ganges elf who got bit by a werewolf and moved to the Hornsaw. So she's not even one of the elves who was part of the whole dream ritual thing. So that's kind of neat. Little piece of lore there. This is all seeded into Rust as well as a side. You can have some interesting side quests and conversations there, where your players can run into this. This is all tapped into Rust a little bit.
Yeah, there's a lot of room for interactions between the various clans, and we all did our best to kind of tie back into what there was in the lore. Some of the clans have more information about them in the original book than others, but basically the idea was to create a world where there's a lot of gray and there's a lot of stresses between the different groups that, as a DM, you can use to generate interest for your players. I mean, you could have a 20-level campaign that just takes place among these Broadreach elves if you really wanted to.
Yeah,
really good.
And if I remember correctly from what I read, so there's 30 some clans.
30. There was 30 that survived. Rust brings back Clan Unicorn.
Gotcha.
Sort of.
And each of those has at least 3
story hooks.
At least 3 story hooks. Yep.
So you have a lifetime of potential gaming just from that chapter.
Yep.
Yeah, each one has story hook, side quests, NPCs, developed NPCs, so a lot of them with stat blocks, and quest rewards too.
Yeah.
If you ran around and gathered all 31 quest rewards, although I'm not quite sure what you get from Clan Unicorn since they're all ghosts. Creepy. The creepy ghost clan. But yeah, and so it's like, and we've gathered all 31 weird things, and it helps us survive in the Hornsaw. And they're kind of goofy, like, I have a wand of magic missile, but I don't know if any of them give you that, but they're along that scale. So you can get all these weird things that you gather if you do all of the bajillion side quests.
Yeah.
It's like, all I could think of was if you're playing one of those open world RPG games.
Absolutely.
But before we transition off or whatever, I wanted to point out something particularly unique about the elves of the Broadreach now. It's different, makes them different from the wood elves of everywhere else. Every one of these elves that participated in this ritual, and I believe their descendants, are haunted, basically. They have memories, and elves don't sleep per se, but they still kind of go into dreamlike state when they meditate,
Right.
and they kind of remember being part of that,
Mm-hmm.
and as a result, they're really fucked up. Like that depression that they had before doing the ritual, it didn't go away, and it's just changed. And they're not insane per se. They're not, but they're just sad, and they have basically mental health issues.
Yeah.
They have PTSD. They saw a lifetime's worth of the horrors of the
Pain,
Hornsaw Forest.
suffering, right?
Yeah.
And in much the way the Forsaken elves are really fucked up people, the Broadreach elves are really fucked up people, just in a different way. So they get a lot of depression and anxiety, and PTSD is part of their lives, and and it's part of, and actually playing a Broadreach elf, you have that as a sort of a quirk as your character of nightmares or something along those lines, where you're just a little quirky, and but more and more tapped into the life of the Broadreach of the Hornsaw than anything else could be, because they're also so innately ingrained into how the workings of the Hornsaw is, and part of that forest in a way that you couldn't be otherwise because of that ritual. I do wonder if any of them were incarnates, which complicates things a bit.
Yeah.
Incarnates remember their past lives and how that would impact being an incarnate in future lives. And that's kind of an interesting thing that somebody could dive into in a game. But yeah, cool,
Sweet,
crazy, screwed up stuff.
So that pretty much brings us up to today, would you say?
Pretty much, yeah.
Which we will cover in next week's episode. We'll talk about current events, a little bit more of what's going on in the Hornsaw during Dead Man's Rest, and we'll talk about the lands and the creepy critters that run around.
Think of a monster, it's there.
Yeah.
This old book has this chapter, part of a chapter that's just a listing of all the monsters from the creature collection at the time, and the monster manuals at the time, of just these are all the possible things you could run into.
Right.
It's long. It's a very long list. It's
in the third edition, you could take a 5-foot step, as a free thing. So I felt like it was one of those things where when you take a 5-foot step, roll against this chart. That also shows up.
Yeah.
Really, and they have multiple encounter charts.
Yeah.
You're thinking it's one forest. No.
Yeah.
It's a whole bunch of mini regions of just nasty things. So.
Well, let's start with our guest, Fran. Do you want to tell us all about yourself and where to find you on the interwebs?
Hi, I'm Fran Stewart, and I write stuff. I write all kinds of stuff, but lately I write a lot of Scarred Land stuff. I've written the book that Sarah's, I wrote the first one she's holding up in her right hand with her, Vigilant Through Shadows and Dreams, exciting Scarred Lands novel about what happens to some poor schmuck when you give him a non-magic weapon and send him into places like the Hornsaw Forest, and they're like, now keep people safe.
Right.
And I edited the second book, Frostlands of Fenrilik, which is full of very, very good content. And I wrote for Dead Man's Rust. Back it.
I'm saying back it.
Dead Man's Rust. We're going through stretch goals like there's no tomorrow, and it's kind of awesome. It's a fantastic book. Like I said, you could literally run multiple 1 to 20 campaigns out of just this book. And as far as where to find me, most places I'm just Francis Stewart. And if you're looking for me on Twitter, I'm at Ronald and Valor, and I like making new friends, so show up and say hi.
Awesome. And Sarah, tell us all about yourself.
I'm Sarah Stewart. I worked on all those things that Fran just said, except Rust. I didn't work on Rust, which is weird. I can't say there was no influence, but they did use I talked about this before. a new ranger terrain that I wrote for Serpent Amphora on Drive-Through RPG.
We managed to get it
It
canonized.
was also in Rust, so it kind of went from the Legislation Vault to being canonized in Rust. So I wrote that, but I'd written that for a different book, and it just got pulled in.
And she helped me with the numbers of the NPCs.
And I
'cause
helped
that
her
part is
with this
hard, and
NPC
Sarah's
stat
really
box.
good at that.
Did help her with the NPC stat. In fact, if you're trying to write NPC stat blocks for 5th edition, I wrote a couple blog posts up on the Onyx Path website that give you some ideas on how to do that. I'd love to hear what people think about that, because I have my own quirky way of writing NPC stat blocks, which might not agree with everybody, but if you don't know how to do it, it's a place to start. Also wrote Yenny's Journal for as an expansion for Frostlands of Fenric, so do check that out as well. And on Drive-Through. And you can find me on morelikethisindustries.com, which is our website, which I did update.
Nice.
Finally. So check that out too. And and we'll be talking. And who the heck are you, actually?
Yeah.
Where am I pointing
So
down?
I'm Jeremy Hochhalter. I also need to update my website. It's either social media or it's my website. I can't do both, so I do need to go and take care of that. So thanks for the reminder. You can find me on social media at WHPubs on Twitter and WH Publications here on Twitch and on Facebook. You can go to whpublications.com. It'll be updated sooner or later. Stuff. I also worked on Frostlands of Fenric. I highly suggest checking that out, pick it up, because you too can write for it and publish on Slurration Vault. It'll be an amazing setting for everyone to share and build together. I think that's pretty much it for me today. Everyone, thanks for watching. We will see you next week, hopefully, as we delve deeper into the current events of the Hornsaw Forest and talk more about Dead Man's Rust. Currently on Kickstarter, go back it.
We're like 250 away from the 3rd stretch goal,
right.
So I want those VTT tokens.
Right?
Back it.
It's gonna be awesome. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you all next time. Bye.
See you around.